Welcome everyone to today's webinar on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's individual artist grants. Today we'll be covering our grants for developing artists, established career artists, and a new grant program for artists who have a community collaboration project. We're going to talk a little bit about the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, the program guidelines for each of those grant programs. We'll take a look at the application system and the applications themselves, some tips as you're writing your application, and information about the whole grant process. So first we'll talk a little bit about the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, which is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor and/or create and promote the arts in their communities. We are one of 11 regional arts councils for the state of Minnesota. Our funding comes from the state of Minnesota, both from their general fund and from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy funds, and also from the McKnight Foundation. SMOC is committed to supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So these are things to think about as you're planning your projects. First, we'll talk kind of together about the individual artist grants for developing and established career artists. These grants are open to adult residents of the 18 counties of our service region, and applicants must be a region resident for at least 6 months prior to submitting an application and remain a resident throughout the contract period. For these grants, funds can be used for a variety of activities designed to aid in public awareness of the artist's work or projects that will aid in the progression to or exploration of a new level in their artistic development and professional career. We're really wanting these grants to enable you to create whatever you'd like to create without needing to worry about, is this something that's going to sell? And we really want these projects to enable you to continue living and working in the Southwest Minnesota region. And also for these grants, all arts disciplines are accepted. Types of projects that you can apply for. And again, these are just some of the options. There are other projects you may come up with, but you can purchase supplies to complete a body of work. You can be compensated for your time to work on your art form. Attendance at workshops or conferences for professional or artistic development. One-on-one study with a mentor. Putting together your portfolio, renting facilities to present your work or for other activities, daycare costs while working on your art, framing, recording, editing, research. Those are all types of projects you can consider. And then we have 2 categories of this type of grant. One is for developing artists, which we define as emerging artists who are at an early stage of their career development, not necessarily having to do with the quality of their work, but just of their career as an artist. So these artists would have a limited yet clearly promising performance, publishing, or exhibition record. And these would be artists who have not yet been acknowledged as established by the other artists and arts professionals in their field. Then we have the grants for the established career artists, and these would be professional artists who have held significant solo shows, performances, or have been published in significant publications. these artists would be at an advanced stage in their career development and will have been acknowledged as an established artist by other artists and arts professionals in their field. The way you kind of determine which category you want to apply in is really sort of looking at your resume of what you've done in career. Do you have those solo exhibits or performances, and do other people in the region recognize you as a career artist? If you're having trouble determining which category you fall into, you can certainly give us a call. And it's, again, if you're on the fence about which way to go, it's best to start applying as a developing artist. But both of these grant programs, you can apply for the same types of projects. So developing artists can request up to $2,500, and the established career artists can request up to $7,000. And for both of those, there's no match required unless your entire project costs more than the grant amount. Then obviously you would need to come up with the remaining funds. The following are not eligible for these individual artist grants: projects intended for mass market distribution or other strictly commercial activities, projects that include publishing initiated solely by the applicant, such as vanity press or self-publishing, equipment requests that are not specifically tied to the project you're trying to do, credits or materials necessary to fulfill degree requirements for students, applications that primarily involve developing curriculum plans or teaching materials, or that are intended to advance your teaching career, projects that don't have an art focus, requests for new building construction or purchase of real estate, activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, activities that attempt to influence any state or federal legislation, payment of debts incurred before the grant begins, and applicants with past SMOC grant projects still in progress or with a past due final report. This is just an overview of some of these eligibility guidelines, so make sure to check the program guidelines and our general grant guidelines for additional information, and I will show you where those are available. I see a question about people who are doing a group art project. If you're doing a sort of collaborative project with more than one person, you can just have one application and the funds would just go to one person. So you couldn't have each person in that collaborative project apply for their own grant for that same project. Feel free to just ask more questions as we go on, but I'm going to continue on and start talking about the community collaboration grants. These are brand new grants for us this year. And again, they're open to residents of the 18 counties in the SMOC region. And the intent of this grant program is to fund projects that bring an artist and a community together in a creative and collaborative relationship. The project should have a lasting impact on both the artist and the community. And again, projects may include any art form. There are two pieces to this type of grant. One, the artist should be reaching a new level in their artistic development through the creation of a major new work. And secondly, the artist should collaborate with the community to introduce them to the arts in a new way, while reaching a segment of the population that is not normally exposed to the art form. The project should be by, with, and for the community, with the activities reflecting the community's energy and qualities. And we don't have a lot of sample projects here, ideas, because we have not done this program before. And at this point, it's kind of open to you to come up with a great idea. The artist must have an active community partner that will support and assist with the project. The community partner can be a city government, chamber, arts council, historical society, or other nonprofit organization, but they cannot be a school. The artist community collaboration grants are available for up to $10,000, and again, no match is required. Whoops, got a little ahead of myself there. In addition to those eligibility items that we mentioned for the other individual artist grants, these are also ineligible for the community collaboration grants. You cannot request fees for entering jury competitions or shows, to take classes or workshops, or travel for research. It cannot pay for activities that take place outside of Minnesota, activities not open to the public, activities requiring artists to pay excessive entry or exhibition fees, or educational projects within a school system. Again, I would advise to check the complete program guidelines and general grant guidelines, as this is just an overview. For all of the programs that we're talking about today, the individual artist and the community collaboration grants, you'll need to have both a start date and an end date. Your start date is the point at which your project is set in motion, which would be activities like ordering or paying for your supplies, registering for workshops that you're attending for, payment of fees or contracts, any rehearsals, advertising. So you cannot spend any money before the project start date. If there's something that you would need to purchase before that date, you cannot include that in your project budget. Your start date also should not be the date of your first activity or event. For instance, if you're doing the community collaboration project, your start date should not be the actual date that you start working with community members. You need to give yourself time to purchase what you need and do your planning. You'll also need to choose a project end date, and you'll want to allow a little time after your activities or events are completed to wrap up your project before that end date. So again, for all of these 3 programs, they all have the same deadlines. The next one coming up is September 12th, and the earliest allowable project start date for that is November 15th. So you could not spend any money or start on your project until that date. And then we've got additional rounds due January 9th and March 20th. And important to note is that all applications must be submitted by 4:30 p.m. on the deadline date. I'll take another moment here for any questions, and then after this we'll go on and start looking at our online grant system and the applications. So I'll just wait to see if anyone has anything. I have a question. Can a person submit more than one application in a round? No, with these artist grants, you can only have one project going at a time. So you'd need to wait until you finished your first project before starting another. We've got another question about paying for a workshop when you register for it. You'd need to either wait to register for the workshop until after that start date, or if you can register without paying right away, otherwise you'd need to exclude that from your grant budget. All right, we will move on for the moment and still feel free to ask questions. So you can access our online grant system in a couple of different ways. This is our website. The quickest way is this login button right here on our homepage. Otherwise, as you're looking at each of the grant pages, there's an Apply Now button on each one of those that'll take you to the grant system. Also, each one of these program pages includes the grant guidelines for that specific program, the general grant guidelines that apply to all SMOC grant programs, a Word document of the application questions. Some people prefer to work in that first and then paste into the application. It's also just a preview of the questions. A preview of the budget form, the evaluation criteria used for this program, a video tutorial for the online grant system, and then you also have all of the dates needed for the different application rounds. So we'll go ahead and move into the grant system. If you already have an account, you can just log in. If you have not created an account before, you'll click here to create a new account. Again, that video tutorial is available here. And if you're not sure if you're already in here or not, you can just contact us. I'm just going to log us in. All right, so if you already have an account and have already done something in the system, you'll come to your dashboard here that'll have previous requests listed. And from that, you can click this apply button. If you have not done anything in here before, it'll take you directly to this apply page. And when you get here, it lists all of the grants that we have available. So you'll need to scroll through and find the one that you need. So it just tells you a brief overview of the program. If you click here, you can preview the form before actually starting an application. But if you're ready to apply, you can just click here and it'll bring you to the application. You'll start with a name for your project. This doesn't have to be anything fancy, just so we know what type of thing you're trying to do. Amount requested, which you may want to wait until you've done your budget to fill that in. Here, all of the guidelines are available again, along with the evaluation criteria and that Word document of the questions. Note that while the character limit for most of these narrative fields is 3750 characters, in case you really need to go into depth, however, the grant reviewers really appreciate short, concise answers as long as you're fully answering the question. So don't feel like you need to use all the characters. You will describe your project, talk about the artistic vision that you have for what you're trying to produce. If you're wanting to do a study opportunity or a workshop, you'll describe that here. There's a spot you can upload information about that or include a website. Here you'll enter your project start and end date, and it reminds you of the earliest start dates allowed for each round. Then you've got your budget form, so you will click this to download that form and save it to your computer and fill it out. There's plenty of line items for all of the things you might need for your project. It's best to have a detailed description of all of your items instead of lumping together something under supplies. So that'll add up the total cost of your project. And again, just a reminder here of the max amount that you can request. If the cost of your project is more than the request amount, you'll want to list here where you'll be covering that extra money from, if you just want to say personal funds or if someone is giving you additional money for that. So then you would save your budget form and then you can upload it right here. If you run out of room on the budget form describing your line items, you can add any more details in the narrative field. This next section is extremely important. This is all about you and your work, and it counts for the most points when your application is being scored. So here you'll upload your resume. You can provide your artist website if you have one, and then your work samples. It gives some guidelines based on what type of samples you might be trying to upload. It's important that if you have images or audio that they're high quality. It's not helpful when our panel are trying to look at tiny pixelated images of your work. So that's something to keep in mind. There are 3 upload fields for your work samples. And so you may need to, if you have several images, you may want to put them all into a PDF or something to put in one file, because each upload field will only fit one file. And then there are also several websites fields available as well. Just to note, you do not want to put links in these description fields because the reviewers cannot access them. They can't even highlight them to copy and paste into their browser. So if you do need to include a website, make sure you use one of these special website fields. We also have a place where you can consent or not for us to be able to use your samples in informational or marketing materials. So that would be, for instance, in announcing that you'd been awarded a grant or in a showcase of grants that we'd awarded in the year. This next section is about where you are in your career right now, and then how you expect this project will help you grow as an artist. Then we just need to collect some data. For some of these questions, you'll see it lists code, so you'll just click there and it'll give you the choices. So you will all choose 01 individual artist for this question. You'll enter your legal name, and then if you've been working under another name previously, and then which of those you'd like to be used for publicity. You'll do an electronic signature here for your application. We're also planning on putting together an artist registry for the region. So if you'd like us to contact you about being listed in that, you can mark here. To save your application, click here, or if you're ready to submit, there's that button as well. So for the moment, we're going to save. It lets you know which things you still have not filled out. So if you're missing something, don't worry, it will let you know. So we were looking at the individual artist developing application, and the career is virtually the same, except there are 2 additional questions. One, what makes you an established career artist? So you'll have to pull from your experience to say, this is why I am applying under this category. And then how will you share or promote your project with the community? Otherwise, those 2 applications are very similar. If you go back to your dashboard, you'll see here's that application you started working on. So you would just click here to continue editing that. And then if you would receive a grant, you'd come back to the same place to find your contract and your final report. They would be available here. Any questions? Is it best to submit the maximum amount of work samples, for instance, 10 digital images? Yes, it's best to put as much in there as is allowed, unless you feel that you have 7 really strong images, and then beyond that point, maybe they're not as strong, then maybe you might want to just stick with the 7. But it is best to take advantage of the maximum amount that you can upload. We are going to go back and take a look at the artist community collaboration application, since that is quite different. The first 2 that we talked about, the developing an established career, those are both funded through the McKnight Foundation. And this community collaboration grant is funded through the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. So you'll see that there are some quite different questions asked. Again, you'll have your project name and amount requested, describe your project and artistic vision. Additional question here is, how will this project leave an arts legacy? It's got space for you to upload any materials or links that help you describe what you're planning to do for your project. It has you talk about the community where this project will take place. How are the residents going to be involved? How does it serve their artistic needs? How are you reaching the underserved through this? Both, how are you reaching that segment of the population that's not normally exposed to the art form? And then also how you will ensure that your project is inclusive and accessible to all who might wish to participate. And some audience numbers, information about your community partner, and then you'll need to also upload an agreement with that partner saying, what your different roles are and responsibilities. Start and end date, your planning schedule, any public events. It's good to include all of the relevant information about your events here, because this is what we use to post those events on our area arts calendar. What sort of publicity are you planning? Then this section is the same as what you've already seen as far as your resume and work samples. And then where you are in your artistic career, how this will help you grow. And then for this project, you will need to come up with some goals and then an outcome evaluation plan. For your goals, you'll need to have one for yourself as an artist, and then for the community project as well. So what kinds of changes you're expecting to come from this project. And up here are those goals and priorities that we were talking about earlier. So you'll want to make sure that the goals you come up with yourself are kind of connected to at least one of these goals. Then you'll also need to come up with a plan for knowing that how you achieved your goal. Are you doing surveys, interviews, focus groups? How will you know that your own artist goal has been met? There's a place if you have an evaluation tool to upload that. Again, here's the budget form, which is slightly different from the other one. It goes into a little more detail because there are more costs involved with a project like this. So you'll itemize all of your expenses here And there's your grant request. And again, if the cost of the project is greater than the grant amount, what other funding sources are you using? Same data collection, name, signature here as well. Any questions about the applications themselves? There's a question here saying, since the community collaboration grant is new to SMOC, has it been done at other arts councils in the state yet? All of the arts councils across the state have their own slightly different projects and grant programs. So it's possible another arts council has had a similar type project. We've had one several years ago that was a little bit like this, and we called it a legacy artist project. But this one really involves a lot more collaboration with the community. But each art council has their own programs. All right, we'll just talk about some tips to think about as you're working on your application. It's a good idea to start early so you have time to gather up everything you're going to need or contact us with any questions. Make sure to read all those guidelines carefully and read the questions fully, making sure to answer all of the parts of each question, although those don't have to be long answers, just complete. So keep your answers clear and concise. It's good to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about you or your work or your project. And also a great idea to have somebody proofread your application. We are here to help you with your application, so you can call us to talk about your project before starting, or if you have questions as you're filling out the application. Also, we can review your application before you submit it, up to 2 weeks before the deadline. After that point, we can't guarantee that we'll have time to look at it, but then we can just read through and make sure you're not missing anything. So after you have submitted your application, staff here will review it for eligibility and completeness, and then they go on to a panel of individuals from the SMOC region who will discuss and score the applications based on the criteria for each program, which we'll talk about in a second. And then finally, our board approves funding based on the recommendations from that grant review panel. So here are the criteria for scoring these grants. For the Developing and Established Career Artist grants, it looks at the artist's excellence of work and talent. That is by far worth the most of your score. Then the project's contribution to your artistic growth and professional growth. And then finally, the feasibility of the project, which is only worth 2 points, but we hope that everything has a reasonable timeline and you have the right tools and supplies. For the Community Collaborations Grant, again, the artist's excellence of work and talent and the artistic merit of the community project, those are both equally important. Then the degree of community collaboration and how that process is all going to work, along with the project's contribution to the applicant's artistic growth. Those are kind of the next level of points down. The feasibility of the project, and then your outcome evaluation plan. So these are the things that the reviewers will be looking at as they're scoring your applications. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete an online contract within 30 days. After you complete your contract, you'll receive 80% of your grant award before your start date, and then you'll receive the remaining 20% after your project and your final report are completed. SMOC's financial assistance must be acknowledged on all publicity and promotional materials using the credit line that will be included in your grant contract. You may need to also include the Minnesota Legacy logo if you're doing that community collaboration grant. And all of the credit information, posters, and logos will be sent to you and are also available on our website. You'll need to complete an online final report within 60 days of your project end date. And it's a good idea to look through that report when you start your project so you know ahead of time what information you might need to gather, any outcomes, attendance costs. So that report is assigned to you as soon as your grant is approved. If you need to contact us, our office is in Marshall. We're open from 8 to 4:30 p.m. Usually there's someone here over lunchtime, although not always. You've got our phone numbers there and email. And thank you for learning about our individual artist grants today. Let us know if you have any questions. I will unmute everyone shortly. If there's anything else that you'd like to discuss, I will stay on. But thanks everyone for attending today.